Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Ashmit Kumar and here are the headlines that we're tracking this evening. Grieving families await answers as investigators comb through the wreckage of the Air India Boeing 787 aircraft which crashed in Ahmedabad. Aviation Ministry confirms that the recovery of a black box, 241 people confirmed dead and a lone passenger survives. Several people fear dead on the ground as the Air India plane crashed into a medical college hostel. Residential buildings nearby also suffer serious damage. At least 5 people confirmed dead so far. Rescue and recovery operations are still underway. India's aviation regulator directs enhanced safety inspections for the Boeing 787 fleet as a preventive measure. The United States decides not to ground the Boeing 787 fleet for now, citing that the investigation is at a preliminary stage. Boeing shares remain under pressure for a second day. Tata Sons chairman N. Chandrasekaran promises transparent communication after the Air India crash. Tata Group says that the 1 crore announced for the families of the victims is separate from the compensation that the airline is liable to pay. Israel attacks Iran's nuclear sites and military leadership in a major attack involving 200 fighter jets. Iran calls it a declaration of war and promises to respond. India expresses deep concern as tensions rise in the region. US President Donald Trump warns of even more brutal attacks if Iran refuses to strike a nuclear deal. Warns that things will only get worse. This after US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Israel decided to act unilaterally to strike Iran. Soaring tensions in West Asia rattle the global markets. Stocks decline across the world. Crude oil prices surge as Israel's attack sparks supply fears. Sensex and Nifty decline, tracking weak global cues to lose 1% this week. Aviation stocks under pressure worldwide after the Air India crash and West Asia tensions lead to airspace closures. National Company Law Tribunal admits a plea to start insolvency proceedings against crisis-hit Gensol Engineering, orders the appointment of an interim resolution professional to take over the management. SEBI has already barred Gensol promoters for allegedly siphoning funds. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman set to hold a brainstorming conclave with the top GST and customs officials next week. Sources say the meetings will focus on rate rationalization, trade facilitation and compensation cess. Sona Comstar chairman Sanjay Kapoor passes away after suffering a heart attack in the UK. The 53-year-old was reportedly playing polo when the incident occurred. Well, the top story this evening, the black box of the ill-fated Air India Boeing 787 plane has been found. Investigations on what caused India's worst air tragedy in close to 2 decades are set to get underway, and grieving family members of the victims await the mortal remains of their closed ones. Now, 241 people were confirmed dead after an Air India Boeing flight crashed into a medical college shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad International Airport. Now, afternoon yesterday, only one person has identified as Vishwas Kumar Ramesh has survived the crash and is receiving treatment. The Aviation Ministry has confirmed that one black box with flight data and cockpit voice recorder has been recovered. Generally, there are 2 black boxes on all commercial airlines. CCTV footage revealed that the flight crashed 59 seconds after taking off with its landing gear still deployed. The plane crashed into a medical college and residential buildings nearby also suffered serious damage. Several people are feared dead. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inspected the crash site earlier this morning, after which he chaired a high-level review meeting. Air India CEO Wilson Campbell also visited the site and briefed the Prime Minister on the steps taken after the crash. Prime Minister Modi also met the lone survivor at the hospital. Speaking to Doordarshan, the survivor recounted his miraculous escape from the tragedy.
How did you manage to escape? Did you pull the emergency doors?
No. Emergency door is broken.
Yeah.
My seat is broken.
Yeah.
Then I see the pace little bit.
Yeah.
Then I will try to come out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
So Did the aircraft catch fire before you came out?
Yes.
Okay.
Little bit fire. After me, I'm out. Then blast.
So, did anybody help you, or you after that you came out on your own? How did you jump from the aircraft?
I'm not jumping.
Okay.
I just walk out, innit?
Okay.
Then ambulance coming in.
You did walk out on the building, or
No, in floor.
on the floor?
Yes. Inside the aeroplane.
Well, for more on this, we're now joined by my colleague Madhya Mujawar. She's joining us from the crash site in Ahmedabad. Madhya, two parts to this tragedy. One, of course, the ill-fated airline, the plane itself, the aircraft AI-1A1-171, but also the fact that it crashed into a medical college hostel. You're on the ground. You're speaking to all the people who saw this from close quarters up front. Tell us what you're picking up.
Well, this was supposed to be a normal sunny Thursday afternoon for the medical students who reside in this hostel, the hostel of the medical college, but it turned into a tragedy when the aircraft, Air India flight AI-171, crashed on their building, taking 125,000 liters of fuel. So you can only imagine what the explosion and the impact of the explosion could have been. We still have some sunlight, so I like to show you the buildings. The four buildings that you see behind me is where the doctors resided, the medical students resided. The fourth building, the last building, is where the maximum shock was felt, and that is the canteen where several students were having their lunch. Eyewitnesses tell us that the fire engulfed everything within 300 meters. So there was the building that you can see covered in smoke, the black smoke. There are trees that are burnt. There were vehicles, bikes that were torched. There were several people who were standing and walking below the building who also got trapped in the explosion. There were animals, birds, cats and dogs who also died in the explosion. Since morning, we have been seeing NDRF teams, ambulances, fire rescue teams going in and out to check if there is anything that they can find out, if they can pull out something, from the crash site. What we also understand is that the crash was felt the maximum on the fourth building, and that is where the maximum casualties can be felt. What is the official number that we know so far is 5, but we also know that there were several cylinders, gas cylinders, that exploded because of the explosion, because of the fire, and that could have led to more casualties. So the official number could also increase going ahead, and we could see more casualties from this building. So people who were not even on the plane became the victims of this tragedy.
More than 100 doctors reached to the civil hospital campus to take care and to support the government, all the officials, authorities, in concern with all the CM sir, our Bhupendra Patel sir, Health Minister, Health Secretary, all the authorities of the BJ Medical College. And we are in hand to hand and with the shoulder to shoulder, all the movements with the government authorities to save the remaining, those patients who are coming from the hostels building. But unfortunately, we have lost our 4 medical students, 1 doctor's wife, and fortunately, we have saved more than 45 medical students in the hostel area.
Meanwhile, the Tata Group has clarified that the 1 crore announced for the families of victims is separate from the compensation that the airline is liable to pay. In a statement, Tata Group and Air India chairperson Chandrasekaran has said that the Air India plane crash was one of the worst days in the group's history. The statement added that the investigative teams from India, the United Kingdom and the United States have arrived in Ahmedabad, and that the company will be completely transparent about the findings of this investigation.
इन्वेस्टिगेशन होना चाहिए, फैक्ट बाहर आना चाहिए, कैसे हो रहा है ऐसा. काफ़ी लोग निर्दोष इसमें सवार हो गए.
आपके कौन थे यहाँ?
मेरे पेरेंट्स थे, मेरे फादर मदर थे, काफ़ी लोग हैं और भी सारे लोग आए हमारे साथ.
अच्छा, तो अब चाहते हैं कि सही तरीके से इसकी
इन्वेस्टिगेशन हो और ऐसी बेदरकारी नहीं होनी चाहिए कभी भी किसी भी फ्लाइट में.
जो हॉस्टल है ना, छोकरे कॉलेज में पढ़ने आते हैं ना, रोटी पकाने जाती है मेरी औरत, तो हम टिफिन भर के निकल गए थे. तो बाद में 1:30 बजे बन गया इधर, तो छोकरे को देखने के लापता है. औरत में छोकरी 2 बरस की बच्ची है,
कितनी बड़ी बच्ची है?
2 साल की बच्ची है,
और कहीं कहीं उसको कुछ पता नहीं चल
नहीं चल रहा।
व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप में आया कि भाई अहमदाबाद से प्लेन जैसे ही उठा वो क्रैश हो चुका है, लंदन जाती एयर इंडिया की फ्लाइट। तो मुझे सुबह में पता चला था कि एयर इंडिया में ये जा रहा है 1:10 वाली।
फिर
तो मेरे को आ गया कि भाई इसमें ये था। तो फिर हम इधर आ गए थे।
तो यहाँ पे सैंपल्स ले लेके डीएनए के।
हाँ,
आपने दिया, क्या बोला डॉक्टर्स ने?
विथिन 72 आवर्स में हम आपको रिपोर्ट देंगे।
जहाँ मेरी बीबी थी, बच्चा था, वहाँ पे विमान का परखा वहाँ पे पड़ा बच्चे के भी, बच्चा जल गया वहाँ पे ही, बीबी थोड़ी जल गई, अभी एडमिट है। 50% उसका भी डॉक्टर बता रहे अभी, देखते हैं अभी क्या जवाब दे रहे हैं।
होश में है? आपसे बात हुई है?
बात तो हुई, कल हुई, आज भी सुबह जाकर बात तो की है। डॉक्टर भी बोले कि 50% है, हम अच्छा कर देगा बोले।
तो उनको मालूम है कि आपका बेटा नहीं रहा?
नहीं,
उनको भी बताया नहीं।
कैसे बता सकते हैं, उनके पहले तो वही पहले चले जाए।
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with the family members of former Gujarat Chief Minister Vijay Rupani, who died in the tragic Air India plane crash. In a post on X, Prime Minister Modi also said that he has known Rupani for decades. The Prime Minister added that he worked with Rupani during some of the most challenging times. Vijay Rupani served as the 16th Chief Minister of Gujarat from 2016 to 2021 and is survived by his wife, Anjali Rupani, and 2 children. Now, India's aviation regulator has directed for enhanced safety inspections of the Boeing 787 fleet as a preventive measure. The one-time checks for the fleet include fuel parameters, cabin air compressions, electronics engine control, hydraulic systems, takeoff parameters. Air India has also been directed to introduce flight control inspections during transits and conduct power assurance checks for the entire 787 fleet within 2 weeks' time. Now, meanwhile, US officials have said that there isn't enough data to suggest a need to ground the entire Boeing 787 Dreamliner fleet. Acting Federal Aviation Administration head, that's Chris Rochlow, told the media that the FAA will not hesitate to implement any safety recommendations if any information arises during the course of the investigation.
I take it that where we stand today, you haven't seen anything that would lead you to think the 787 fleet needs to be grounded or anything like that?
I'd start with it's so preliminary, and we've seen the video on the dramatic video of the tragic crash. We have assembled a team, an expert team, to work with the NTSB and with the Indian authorities to investigate that. My point earlier was, as we proceed down this road with the investigation itself, if there's any information that becomes available to us regarding any risk, we will mitigate those risks immediately.
Well, my colleague Parikshit Luthra also caught up with Captain Steve Schneibner, a U.S. Navy veteran whose YouTube video on the Air India plane crash has gone viral on social media. Here's an excerpt of that conversation.
Very bitter day in the aviation community, and certainly around the world, and certainly in India, to watch what happened. The first crash of 787, it looks like almost everybody on board perished except for one. And then, to make it even worse, it crashed into a residential area, which is just tragic in the extreme. And so it's very heartbreaking.
Right. I would like to ask you, you've put out a very detailed report about the possible causes. There has been some talk about the possibility of bird hits. Do you see any likelihood of that?
Well, that is a possibility. Now, we don't want to rule it out completely, but when you look at the video, you don't see any birds. You don't see a flock of birds. And to take both engines out simultaneously, you would have to have a lot of birds. In addition to that, there's no indication out of the back of the engine that they ingested any foreign objects like a bird. You would see flames, you would see sparks, you would see smoke. Nothing like that happens. It appears that the engines are operating normally. As you see that airplane go down the runway and then rotate, you can see the dirt off the side of the runway spiraling off. So it tells you that they were at full power even as they rotated. There's no indication that they hit birds, at least as far as I can see. It would be very unlikely it would take both engines out at the same time.
Right, so no indication that they were hit by birds. There has been a lot of talk about the position of flaps. You've also said earlier that it's very difficult to make out from the visuals. But when it comes to flaps and the position that they were in, what is critical there in terms of the positioning and probably wrong positioning of flaps if that happened?
Well, it's not likely that they took off with the flaps up because there's just too many warning systems in the cockpit that would cause the pilots to stop the takeoff roll. Once you push the power up, bells and horns and lights begin to blare at you, and they would have stopped the takeoff roll. Most likely they had their flaps set properly for takeoff. My theory is that once they rotated and began to climb, at about 50 to 100 feet off the ground, the pilot flying is going to ask for the gear to be lifted up into the aircraft. He wants to get rid of all that drag now that he doesn't need the landing gear anymore. If, and this is if mistakenly the co-pilot grabbed the wrong handle, and the landing gear handle is very close to the flap handle, and if by mistake the co-pilot grabbed the flap handle and raised the flaps, that would cause the sequence of events that we see on the video where the airplane is flying normally. As you see it going right now at this point, it's on a normal trajectory. Right about here is where it begins to settle in, and that would indicate to me that the flaps were coming up. The aircraft, the wings were losing lift at this point instead of gaining lift. The landing gear is still out. It doesn't move. It never comes up. That causes a tremendous amount of drag, and the airplane begins to lose speed. It begins to descend. The pilot's only got one option at that point. That's to push on any more power that he's got and to pull up on the nose. He doesn't have enough altitude to lower the nose and gain any airspeed. Very tragic.
Well, you can catch that entire conversation with Captain Steve Scheibner at 9:30 p.m. right here on CNBC TV 18. Coming up on India Business Hour, US President Donald Trump warns of even more brutal attacks if Iran refuses to strike a nuclear deal. More details in just a bit. Well, you are watching India Business Hour. Now, the other big story this evening, there has been a major escalation in West Asia. The Israeli military has launched a wave of strikes against nuclear sites in Iran and also targeting Iran's military leadership. Israel struck the Natanz uranium enrichment plant and has killed 6 nuclear scientists so far. Iran's top military commanders have also been killed, including General Hossein Salami, the head of the Revolutionary Guard. Israel deployed 200 fighter jets, striking more than 100 targets in Iran, including many in the capital, Tehran. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu justified the military operation and said that it could continue as long as necessary. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has vowed to take action and threatened that Israel would face severe punishment. Here's a report.
Israel said it launched airstrikes against Iran on Friday, hitting over 100 targets, including nuclear facilities and missile factories, and killing top military commanders in Iran. The operation sparked a fresh escalation in tensions between the nuclear-armed rivals, and also came ahead of Washington's nuclear talks with Iran scheduled for Sunday. State TV in Iran showed video of burning buildings in Tehran early Friday after the strikes were reported. As day broke, injured Iranians sat by the curbside, and firefighters tended to smoldering buildings. Israel will face severe punishment for the attack. That's according to a statement from Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, read out over state TV. State media said the strikes hit the headquarters of Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard Corps and killed top commander Hossein Salami. And according to Iran, several nuclear scientists.
At present, the competent Iranian authorities have confirmed that the Natanz enrichment site has been impacted and that there are no elevated radiation levels.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the extensive strikes were needed to stop an existential threat to Israel's survival.
In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival.
Israel declared a state of emergency Friday as authorities anticipate retaliatory attacks from Iran. People in Tel Aviv were seen stocking up on essentials, and Israel's air defense has been put on high alert for incoming missiles and drones. Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport has been closed until further notice. A flight tracking website showed airlines clearing out of the airspace over Israel, Iran, Iraq, and Jordan on Friday after Israel's airstrikes.
Now, US President Donald Trump has warned Iran to make a deal, saying that things can only get worse from here. This comes after US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that Israel acted unilaterally and that the US was not involved in the attacks. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said, and I quote, "There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire." End of quote. Well, let's shift focus now onto the commodity space. Gold prices rose as Israel strikes on Iran drove safe haven demand for the yellow metal. Prices were also supported by the market's hopes that the US Federal Reserve will cut interest rates. This after US inflation data was lower than expected. Israel's attack also pushed crude oil prices higher, owing to growing fears that the conflict could spread to disrupt oil supplies from the Middle East. Both Brent and US crude benchmarks have climbed to levels not seen since January. From commodities to equities, Sensex and Nifty closed in the red on the back of geopolitical tensions. Nifty held on to key support levels and ended the session above the 24,700 mark. Financials underperformed, with HDFC Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank and IndusInd dragging the Nifty Bank Index. For this week, Sensex and Nifty declined 1% each. Broader markets underperformed, with Nifty Bank and Midcap falling 2% each. Surbhi Upadhyay, my colleague, is joining us now with a quick wrap of how the markets performed over the course of this last week. Surbhi.
Well, it's not been the best of the weeks, not just for the market, but for our countrymen, for our country overall, given the devastating events that we had in the state of Gujarat. But talking about the market, what was a range-bound consolidation gave way to weakness by the time Friday approached. The week started with a bit of unwinding in the mid-cap arena, some correction coming through after what's been a tremendous rally throughout most of April and May. But then the correction spread to the large-cap screen as well, because we had a new geopolitical event to deal with, and that is the Israeli strikes on Iran. So as crude flared up close to $75 a barrel, we saw the impact playing out on the Nifty as well. On Friday in particular, the Nifty was down just about 0.7%. It recovered a bit from the lowest opening levels, but nonetheless, there was pressure coming in. So the Nifty was down 0.8%, mid-cap index, the small-cap index, and of course the Bank Nifty as well, all were weak, ranging between 1% to 0.5%, depending on which index you are looking at. Now, why this week is important is that it's also told us that the Nifty has been unable to stay above the 25,100 mark, which has been the top of the consolidation range. So we've not managed to have a substantial, decisive move above that level. Let's talk about the losers on Friday, starting with aviation stocks. So a lot of reasons, obviously, there why those stocks were lower. But in addition, there's been some promoter selling, additional promoter selling in Interglobe Aviation. That stock was down 4%. SpiceJet was down 2%. Other Nifty losers on Friday, Adani Ports. The banks were particularly weak. IndusInd Bank, HDFC Bank, Kotak, SBI, these were all down. Power Grid, Bajaj Auto, Titan. So basically, it was an all-fall down kind of a day on Friday. In fact, only 2 to 3 gainers, which were on the positive side, among them BEL, TCS and Tech Mahindra. Oil was the big story on Friday, and we are on, sort of in very uncharted, uncertain territory right now. The cut on BPCL, HPCL and IOC actually was not that much. These stocks were down just between 1% and 2%. Let's see how this plays out. Of course, the upstream oil companies did very well. Oil India and ONGC gains between 1% and 3% over there. For the week as a whole, the Nifty's lost 1.3%. Mid-cap index is down a little more. It's down 1.6%. And the small-cap index is down 1.3%. The mid-cap unwinding that I'm speaking of, it's happened in the parts which have rallied very hard. So, for instance, capital market stocks, real estate stocks. These were the indices. The Nifty Capital Market Index is down 4.5% for the week. The real estate index is down 3.5% for the week. So we end off on a pretty somber and tentative note. And the market will need to see what are the weekend developments to see if the conflict in the Middle East, if that sort of doesn't escalate any further. That's the starting point. And then, of course, some more on the trade front as well is something that we have to watch out for.
Right, Subhi, thanks so much for that. Now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will hold a brainstorming conclave with top GST and customs officials next week. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that the meetings will focus on rate rationalization, trade facilitation and compensation cess. The Finance Minister will also seek an update on current revenue trends. The deliberations will also cover international taxation and safe harbour issues. The Bombay High Court has paused Celebi's appeal against the revocation of its security clearance following the centre's request. The court noted that the matter is identical to the case that's pending in the Delhi High Court. It added that it will wait for the Delhi High Court's judgment on the case. The Turkish airport services firm's clearance was withdrawn on national security grounds post-Operation Sindhu. The Ahmedabad bench of the National Company Law Tribunal admitted an insolvency plea against the Gensol Engineering. The plea was filed by Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency. The NCLT has directed for the initiation of these proceedings and the appointment of an interim resolution professional to take over the company's management and operations. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Thank you so much for watching. For more news and updates, stay tuned to CNBC TV 18.